Welcome to Power Boat Talk, the podcast where we talk everything performance boats with your host, Joe Rode.
So welcome to Power Boat Talk. Today I have with me Jim Frisbie, who is a longtime boat rigger, general manager, sales manager, and a couple pretty prominent Southern California boat companies. And so we're going to talk about that today and hear some good stuff from Jim. So thanks for joining me today, Jim.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate you reaching out to me and having me on here. It's an honor.
Oh, thanks, man. You've been, God, I think I met you. Yeah, well, my dad opened his shop in like 78. So it's probably at least about then. I think it was probably about then when I met you, but you've always been a good resource. And we did, I don't know if you remember, you actually rode for me in a ski race or two, I think. And so, yeah, no, you've always been a great guy to talk to. So I'm looking forward to this. So why don't you tell us what you're up to these days?
Well, post Hallett, wife and I moved up to the state of Washington, Western Washington. And we had purchased property back in 2004 with the intention of retiring up here. And when Hallett sold to Nordic, it was a good clue for us to, retire, which is a 4-letter word. But so we moved up here and have been building our dream home since then.
Yeah, that's awesome. I follow you on social media. And it's like, yeah, you've always got some pretty cool projects going. The house looks fantastic, and I'll never forget the day I talked to you, and maybe it was when I think it was, I don't know if it was probably after Nick died, but when the Hallett thing was coming to a close. But I remember you telling me, I have some property in Washington. I think I might just retire, and I'm like, yeah, sure you are, whatever. And then like a week later, like you're gone. Yeah, like you didn't even look back, man.
Well, I had a few opportunities presented to me, and one was a gracious offer from Randy Davis of Nordic to move up to Havasu and keep working with the Hallett brand, and it just wasn't something that my wife and I wanted to do. We did not want to move to Havasu, and I was going to be 65 in a few months, and just decided to make the move.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good for you. I mean, he would have been really lucky to get you out there, but even though, Havasu's just like Washington, right?
Oh yeah.
So, from when I met you, you were working at SKV Boats, SKV was just always like a little hidden treasure, man. You guys had your following, and you were located in San Dimas. My dad's shop was in Glendora, so probably 10 minutes down the road. So we were over there a lot, and my dad sold a lot of those boats, and we talked them up a lot. And it was just a fantastic boat, and Gene was awesome. And so I don't know if was that kind of your first job in the marine industry? Did you grow up boating, or how did it work out that way?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I had worked at a Cornet variety store in DeWarty. That was mainly my first job. Worked there for 3.5 years. Wanted to get into the banking industry, but things kind of went a different direction. And my wife's older brother, Jim Nichols, he had started working for Mach 1 boats. And I think the owner's name was Keith something.
God, I forgot all about that company.
Yeah, and so he might have started with Gene and then went to Mach 1, but anyway, he got me hooked up with Gene, and I started at absolute bottom rung at SKV, that's for sure. Gene was great, and I remember those were the days he had a 21-foot, and that's where the SKV name came from. Tumble in transom, tumble in sides of the hull at the transom, and jet boats, jacuzzi jets, 455 olds, and in our heyday, man, we were putting out one a week.
Oh, you were doing that many, really?
Yep. Gene Jackson was the main guy next to Gene Racine, and he kind of took me under his wings. And Gene Racine actually rented out a small warehouse in Glendora. I think it was on Grand and Arrow Highway. And we'd pick up a haul Monday morning and rig it out and give it back to Gene Friday. And, that was when things were going pretty good. I started in 72, and it wasn't long after that Gene built his newer building on Arrow Highway in Cataract in San Dimas.
Well, 72. Wow.
Yeah, just yesterday.
Wow, that's crazy. And so then when you went there, were you like an enthusiast, or did you know anything about working on stuff, or?
I knew nothing other than I needed a job. Yeah, and I was, I've always been, a very loyal person. I didn't, I didn't jump jobs trying to do this, that, or the other thing. I guess maybe I was scared. I don't know, but Gene started me out basically kind of just cleaning up and helping the laminators and learning all about fiberglass and how you get itchy. And, something needs to be ground, you just send Jim over there. He'll do it. Moved into cutting wood for the boats. And I can remember Gene had me cutting like 2 or 3 sheets of plywood at a time with his old, worm drive skill saw. And I burned it up one day. What are you doing to this? I go, well, the thing's like 50 years old and you're asking it to do more than it can do. So, good times.
And I was thinking about, I've really been, since I connected with you, I've just been really thinking about this and thinking a lot about Gene. And we're talking about Gene Racine, by the way, is Gene's last name. And, I spent, not a ton of time with Gene, but a bit. He'd come and hang out at the shop after he retired, and I was at your shop once in a while. And you guys, I could be wrong here, but you guys were kind of a lot alike. You were both very analytical guys, very humble, kind of just nice guys, and so I wonder if that's the case. But I was thinking it sure seemed like it, because you guys just always seemed to get along, and you were kind of from the outside world, it was like you guys were kind of on the same page with everything.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly Gene's background, but I'm pretty sure he was an engineer, and maybe with Aerojet or something like that. And all those programs, I think, were closing down, and he started up the boat business. And analytical. Oh my goodness gracious. He came up with that wraparound window and having to bend metal, and oh my gosh, then we got into, we didn't drape form the plexiglass, but we had all the molds and jigs and cutout jigs, and heaven forbid you're tightening up the frame and all of a sudden the plexiglass splits,
my gosh.
But he was always trying to just make something nobody else had.
Yeah, well, and I think he did in a lot of respects. There's a lot of stuff he did, and I did read that on the internet somewhere that he had been an engineer at Aerojet before he started doing this. I heard something about the windshields too. I guess, was it like Hawaiian or somebody knocked him off or splashed him or copied him, and that's when he really changed it around. It's like, hey, I'm gonna really show them how to do this and do something they couldn't do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They basically copied the design, and so then Gene went to the wraparound window on the front of that cabin, and it proved itself. It lasted and lasted and lasted. So heaven forbid anybody has to replace one right now.
I guess we shouldn't laugh about that, right?
No. Well, you talk about SKV. Interestingly enough, 2 years ago, a 22-footer. I saw it on the, I think it was Day Cruisers United. That was it. And it was in Southern California, and 1981 22-foot SKV. And I just had to have it. Yeah, I bought it, and eventually had a good friend that lived down there. He went and got it for me and held on to it for about 6 months until I could travel south and grab it and bring it up here. And no engine, upholstery's shot. I have 2 partial engines and out driving gimbals. And someday when I finish the house, then we'll start working on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I know how the hulls were built, and the hull is in really good shape. So
yeah.
And the trailer made it from Southern California up to Washington.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, you'll have to send some pictures out. That'll be cool when you start working on that. But yeah, and then I know early on you guys are doing a lot of jacuzzis, but then you guys were kind of one of the first ones around that started getting into stern drives.
Yeah, that when we moved over to the newer building, things were kind of picking up for everybody. But one thing that happened early on, gosh, I'm trying to think back to the years now, but things started picking up. And it must have been right after 72 when we had the new building, because Rick Taylor came to work for Gene Racine.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Rick Taylor, I don't know if he still is or not, but, ended up at IMCO after leaving Hallett. And actually Rick Taylor worked with my father-in-law, and they built a 54-foot ferro cement hulled sailboat in their backyard in Duarte.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah,
crazy.
It is crazy. So, but yeah, so anyway, Rick was there, and then, 73, I think that was the first oil embargo, and everybody got laid off, myself included. I went to work for the Bank of America finally. I got my dream job, and I was a bank teller. Yeah, the problem was I was in there like replacement staff, and I would go to different branches almost every week. It's like starting a new job every week. And 4 months later, April of 74, Gene called me up, had a project, a new mold he did, and that was the Sun Chariot, and 24 Sun Chariot. And my future brother-in-law, younger brother of my wife, and I color sanded and polished the molds out and got them ready. And then Gene offered me my job back, probably twice what I was making at the bank, and I was going to be married in a couple of months. And so got back into the boat business for good.
Well, he kind of dodged a bullet, because you could have really liked that bank stuff and never come back.
Well, had it not been for the fact that I had to go to different branches, like I said, almost every week to fill in for vacation people and sick people and whatnot. Yeah, might have stayed in the banking industry, but it was one of those things I can remember now. Baldwin Park was my main office, and I wanted to get into their operations training program, but because I didn't have, this class and that class in college, I didn't qualify for their program, but yet I could do everything in the bank. So it was like they weren't going to budge, so I went back to building boats.
Yeah, well, good for Gene, good for all of us.
Thank you.
So, hey, I had forgotten about that Sun Chariot, but then when I read some stuff on the internet the other night when I was searching around, then I remembered it. So why don't you talk about that thing, because that thing was ahead of its time too.
Oh gosh, yeah. It's well, one thing Gene put in I think they were Chryslers. And they were a direct drive, and the transmission V drive was all, mounted on the engine, and to a short prop shaft, and it just made the seating. You had a bench across the back, and a bench with a little walkway through the side up front, a jump seat next to the engine hatch, and a nice 24-foot, semi-deep V, cruiser. I mean, it just was really, day cruiser. It was just really, it was a great boat.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing them. I don't know if we worked on them or whatever, but I remembered it. And I'm like, yeah, I remember. Well, my dad's saying the same thing at the time. Like, this thing is so cool. But if I remember correctly, I don't think he ended up really selling a bunch of them, right?
No, Gene never really did sell a lot of boats, unfortunately. And who knows why? He just never promoted them, or played things too close to the vest. I mean, we were busy. We built boats, and and I don't even know how many were sold. But that would have been in 74 when that model was introduced. And I think the 22 was introduced after that. I don't remember the years when they all started, but I do remember that 24 Sun Chariot.
I kind of thought that Sun Chariot was a little bit later than that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. I remember sanding and polishing.
You mentioned somebody, Gene Jackson too. I was reading about him, and I guess did he? Somebody said that he designed that turbo kit when he was at Gene's that Banks ended up selling for Merc Cruisers. Do you remember that?
Oh gosh, no, I don't. But yeah, Gene was another. I'm pretty sure engineer cut from the same cloth as Gene Racine, and yeah, very meticulous. Analytical, and yeah, I don't remember turbo stuff. Other than Gene Racine trying to keep his motors running when he was ski racing and blowing up out drives. I remember that a lot.
So yeah, let's talk about that. So do you know how he got into ski racing?
Exactly how?
Yeah, or just
maybe try to promote the brand.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. I think he started, I think, pulling his daughter Stacy, and then we got into pulling the different classes, and most skiers had their own observer, and I usually went a navigator, especially with the Catalina ski race, and I can remember the Anacapa ski race. And that was before, GPS and all that sort of stuff. That was all dead reckoning or compasses.
Yeah, Anacapa, I think I remember, didn't Gene break his back in that race?
He absolutely did, yes. And gosh, you're digging in deep to my brain here, Joe.
Yeah, Anacapa. So island off the coast of Ventura. They had quit racing it when I started racing, but I had heard it could just get crazy bad. And I think Gene told me the story about it. He just hit so hard one time out there that it broke his back.
Yeah, that was on the way out, and if I remember right, we were pulling Jeff Wooten.
Oh my gosh.
I think his father was observing, and because the water was so rough, Gene never had the fastest boat, and he always had plenty of engine, but the TRS outdrives back then, they couldn't handle sustained power, but you couldn't go. I don't know how fast we were going, but all the other boats were pretty much smaller circle race type boats, and they just couldn't sustain speeds, and we did. But yeah, we came down, and I think Gene's race jacket caught the back of the seat, and the plastic plate in the back of the jacket, I think, jammed into his back. But,
oh wow!
He backed off and then just gritted it out and went around the island. But every time we hit a big bump, he had to back down. And if I'm not mistaken, we took second overall.
Wow.
And this is crazy. I think Gary Steele's team, I think they won it, and only because Gene couldn't push the boat fast enough.
So, well, I have to tell you that what I remember with Gene is he raced, and if the boat I remember, I don't know if he had another one before this, but he always had his 24. He was racing his 24, and he called it Big Red. He named it after, I think he named it after his daughter Stacy, right?
Yep, she had red hair. Yep.
And he was the only guy out there at the time running a stern drive, but that boat, it would run hard, and it was 24 foot, so it would lay down the water. And it was I actually went one of the very first marathon races I ever skied behind. I skied behind that boat. And in fact, I remember Gene telling me that, well, if you're going to ski behind me, Jim's your observer. So I said, okay. It was at Havasu, and I remember it being it was literally one of the first marathons. It was a really good race, and we had fun. But I thought that boat was cool, twin turbo motor, and number threes had TRS drives at the time, I imagine. Yeah.
Yep.
But see, like I don't remember that thing breaking. But of course, you were much closer to it than me. But it just seemed like it was always consistent. And most of the years I was racing, he was pulling Kenny Wilcoxon for a lot.
There you go. I was trying to pull that name out of my head. Yep.
Yeah. Now most people, unless you're in the community, the ski race community, although Kenny raced GN boats for years, but Kenny wasn't a real famous person, but in the circle he was famous, and he was just a great guy. And I don't know if but a few years ago he passed away.
Oh no, I didn't know that. But
yeah,
I think he was older, because I remember we were racing usually. I think they called it Veterans Men or something like that.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah. So yeah, Kenny probably would be pushing 70 years old right now if he's still around, I would imagine. But
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just I'm going to talk about him a little bit, even if a lot of people don't know him, because the people that do know him will love to hear about it. But he was a great guy. He was a funny guy, and the thing about Kenny, right? He was, if I remember the story correctly, he was like legally blind. Like,
yeah, he couldn't see it. You remind me of a story that Gene had an eye doctor make up some lenses that would fit into his goggles, so that he could, maybe see a little bit better when out racing. Yeah.
And I remember that story because I remember Kenny telling me the story, and he got those new goggles, and everybody was so excited because you could see. And they went down the first straightaway, and he said, I could see so much stuff, it scared the crap out of me. He goes, I whipped those things off so fast, and he never wore them again.
Oh, I don't remember that, but it's probably a true story.
Oh, yeah. I distinctly remember him telling me the story. So, but yeah, he was just a good guy, and he just got it. I'll tell you, I don't know how many times too we'd be sitting there before a race, and as I got a little bit better, I got pretty decent at it. But he would sit there before the race, and he'd be, Joe, I think we're gonna click one off today. Like, you say that before every race, Kenny.
Yeah. Yeah, fun times.
Yeah, he was a really good dude. But him and Gene, I mean, you guys were like the perfect team, because he had the personality, and him and Gene were always joking with each other, and yeah, that was good times. But that's what I remember. The boat was cool. So then fast forward, I think I believe Gene at some point had a real tragedy, and he lost his son Rennie in a boating accident. And I think was he retired before that happened, or was that kind of when he decided to retire?
No, I think that was after retirement.
Okay.
If memory serves me, because things were not going well. Let's see, this was 1983, and I know things were slowing down, and gosh, I don't know if we had another oil embargo or, gasoline crunch, or just what was going on. But yeah, boat sales were down, and he just didn't want to put any more of his life savings into the business. So he was going to sell the property and, close the doors. And the other day, after you had reached out to me, I was telling my wife that I said, oh my gosh, I was the last Mohican at SKV and at Hallett. Kind of strange. It just, and Gene lined up my job at Hallett. There was another, I think the man was a fireman, and gosh, I don't know if this is going to be right, Solution Boats.
Oh yeah.
And that was one option. And I went and met with him, and nothing terrible. I will tell you though, I was extremely nervous. I mean, I had never, had a problem with working or looking for a job. The only time I got laid off was in '73, and in '83, I was married, had just had our third child, and we had a house we were paying for, and pretty scary stuff. But the next thing I know, I met with Nick, and that was all lined up, and some of the molds went, I guess all the molds went to Hallett. And another funny thing is my first week at Hallett, I took a vacation because I started after Memorial Day in 1983, because I'd already had a trip planned, and we had train tickets to take the family from Southern California to the Bay Area. And I said, yeah, Nick, I'd love to come aboard, but it's going to have to be a week from now. So.
When that happened, all the molds went over to Hallett, right? And I don't know if the story I heard was that Nick was going to build them and just give Gene a royalty and kind of keep it going. But I don't think that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, I don't know anything about royalties, but I know right away, Nick said, let's put one in the mold. And that was one of the 24s with the window. And that boat's still floating around. And I've actually had a couple conversations with, he might have sold it by now, but that was, I think, was the only SKV we built. And who knows why, the Halletts were selling so well. And I think, of course, I can, try to believe this, he got me. That's what he got. So that I think paid off for him over the years. But unfortunately the molds ended up getting destroyed on the move from Arrow Highway up to the Martin Road building.
Yeah, I don't know. Nick was a little bit of a different guy, so I don't know exactly what the motivation was or what happened, but I do know that Gene wasn't real happy that happened. So
yeah, I know Nick came to me and just kind of asked me, how I felt about it. And, I was pretty young and didn't really know much. I go, well, you got to do what you got to do. At that time, and that was what, 85, when we moved. At that time he had, I don't know how many models, many molds. Yeah. And gosh, I've looked back. I don't even know if I have any more records, but the number of hull numbers when I was keeping track of all that we had used and were using and couldn't use the same model designation. It was just phenomenal, the amount of molds and things and models that Nick produced.
Yeah, no, exactly. He had a ton. He still has a ton, but even, I see stuff all the time, like older stuff I'll run across or whatever, and they'll say that's a Hallett. I'm like, I never saw that boat. Yeah.
I see it myself, and I was there a long time.
Yeah. So Gene and Nick, I think, were really good friends, right? I think they used to hang out, like their wives. They used to, because I think Mary and Shirley were friends too. So I think they used to hang out and stuff in the old days.
Yeah, more than likely. I don't think I saw much of that, but I'm sure that's how my move came to be, going to Hallett, was something along those lines.
Well, Jim, I don't know all the particulars of your move to Hallett, but I can tell you it was probably just, you're a pretty valuable guy. I think you're underestimating that. I think, there's never going to be any question that Nick was going to get you. So.
Well, I'm pretty humble I just try to work hard and do the best I can.
I know you were, even all my years, and even after I'd worked for Rex for years in Eddie, and I got, I did more and more with boat builders. I spent time going to boat builders, all the guys in Havasu, and I even went to, would go to Miami every year. So I got to know a bunch of those builders back there. And I used to tell guys all the time that you were probably the most organized, most efficient guy of any of the guys that I had ever dealt with. I could call you up and you could tell me what size cable you used in a 21 or whatever, and I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but man, these guys would hash stuff together, but you would always be the guy when you're in order and parts, you knew exactly what you wanted. You guys always, you had a pattern of doing things and you stuck to it, and, you were just real consistent. And I think that had a lot to do with the way you did things, but that's, from my point of view outside, that's what I think. And that's what I saw. So
thank you.
Yeah. You don't need to be so humble. but I guess what I was getting at too is although Gene and Nick would kind of, you'd see them together, they would kind of mess around with each other a little bit. But Gene and Nick were kind of, it was a kind of two different guys, man. I think it seems to me like Nick was a lot different than Gene. If Gene told you something, you knew that was the way it was, and Nick, you just never quite knew, because he was always kind of playing games with people, and he was just a little different.
Yeah, true story. I do remember, I mentioned earlier that, Rick Taylor went from SKV to Hallett, and then and we had occasion to kind of hang out with Rick, my wife and I. Like I said, he had worked with my father-in-law, and it used to be kind of a joke, because Gene would send me over to Hallett, because we needed a gallon of resin, or that was kind of the joke. But, Nick, when he bought stuff, if he needed a drum, he'd buy 10 drums. If he needed, 3 of something, he'd buy 15. And Gene, and I think I get a lot of this from Gene, is he only got what he needed, and sometimes he'd run short. It's like we were always borrowing gel coat or something. And I heard on the backside that, Nick would just raise the roof, but he would always, provide what was needed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think Well, again, I didn't know Rick had been at SKV. That's funny, but Rick was at. I mean, he was basically Nick's Jim Frisbie for years. I mean, Rick was over there kind of doing it all. And then I know when you went there, I mean, everybody in the industry is like, man, now they got the A team over there because they got Rick and Jim. But
yeah, we worked good together, and yeah, Rick again was very organized, knew what he was doing, and he fell into his passion of building V drives. And back, I can't remember the years, but and Nick would put him on special projects. We tried some RTM molding and went through that, and all kinds of different things. But I think Rick really enjoyed it when he got to fabricate the parts and pieces for V drives, and then he kind of got off into his own little world and pretty much ignored the day-to-day business, and that I just kind of fell into managing that. And then then he moved on. I think the end of 94 or 95 was when Rick moved on.
Yeah, then he went to IMCO. He stayed there for years. He retired a few years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. Well, 2 years now is always 10 years.
Well, I think he was 8 years older than me, and I just turned 70 this year, so he probably deserved his retirement.
Yeah. Oh, in fact, after I got off the phone after we were texting the other day, I'm like, I got to ask him if he still stays in touch with Rick. So I guess I know my answer there. I have to try to track him down.
Yeah, we never have stayed in touch very high. Every now and again, back when we were in business, I would maybe get him on the phone and we'd chat a little bit, but no, we kind of grew apart. We went our different ways, but yeah, always a great guy.
Yeah, he was a really good guy. Really good guy. That worked out really well for Nick, for you to roll over there and handle production, and then move Rick over into doing what he did best in R&D and the new stuff. And Nick was always doing a race boat. He was obviously much more into racing than you guys at SKV were. And,
right.
I was gonna ask you. I kind of asked you the other day about it, but so when you got there, were you involved in any of the newer stuff like the Vectors or I think the 210 was later, right? But I think the Vector was probably one of the newest models when you got there.
Yeah, let's see. Bud Bailey came on board, kind of changed tracks here, but he came on board with his models, the 270 and the 340. I think that he called the 27 and 34 Silver Wing. I think that was maybe 85.
Okay. I kind of forgot about him. Okay.
Yeah. And, he was really instrumental from that point on in, developing the 210, the Vector, the 30, the 270. I'm trying to, then there was a few, we did a 32, but Phil Percival tooled that deck.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't know I remembered all this stuff. Then there was, we built the Elite, and I don't remember, I was involved. Let's see, the 7.9 EXP we actually built on Arrow Highway. I can remember that because Rick was working with a modeling clay machine oven and laying the modeling clay on the deck and shaping it. I know that was done at Arrow Highway. And then I think we did the Vector right after moving to the newer plant on Martin Road in Irwindale.
I keep asking about the Vector because it's kind of, as people are these days, there was kind of a move, in 2008 when things hit bad, a lot of guys really kind of downsized,
Sure.
a lot of guys had to, but actually a lot of guys, I was at Eddie at the time, and there was just a lot of guys who were like, I'm tired of putting $1,000 in my tank, even if I can afford it. And it's just a simpler, easier time. So there's just a lot of guys going back into smaller stuff, and the Shadas and the Vectors are kind of like the cult following because they're such cool boats, and they're fast boats, but they're safer than a flat bottom. So there's a lot of chatter online about Vectors and Shadas, and so that's why I ask about that.
I didn't have any direct input in the design of it, but I was involved with it when it was being built. But very cool boat. Yes.
And then I think who is that guy skied behind? Bruce Zeller. I skied behind. He was one of Gene's buddies, and I skied for a couple of years. Remember, he had that red and yellow.
The black.
Oh yeah. You know what? You're right. He had the black one that he hot rodded.
Yeah, the black metal flake, right?
That's right. And then you guys built him a brand new one that was a race, purpose built. I don't know if it's lighter or what, but he built it just for racing, and I skied behind it for a couple of years. But then I know at some point he went to a Vector, put all this stuff into a Vector, one of the first stern drive ones.
I didn't know that. I don't think maybe I didn't put two and two together, or maybe it's been so long I don't remember.
Yeah. I barely remember it. It was just in fact, I remember I skied behind it one time, but it was real late in the game and kind of not too long before I quit doing it. So just a lot of interest, and they were great boats.
Yeah, and just you mentioned 2008. That was kind of that was probably for so many businesses everywhere. But man, we were really cranking. We moved into our new facility off the freeway there, on Rivergrade Road, and just had the laminating shop going. And it was just so disappointing to see all that have to, there's just no business. And there was times after that, as the years slowly proceeded and a little bit of, business pickup, that I would ask Nick, I wasn't handling books, but I knew what things cost, and I knew what it took to run the place. And I'm like, man, I can't believe you're doing this. And his comment to me was the boat business gave him everything he has, and he's just giving back to his loyal employees.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. As long as he could, he just kept people on as long as he financially felt it prudent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was brutal. I wasn't working for Eddie at the time. I was doing magazine. I was the one who was doing magazine publishing, and it got really bad. And when I ended up going back to Ed's a couple years later, and going back and looking at sales numbers, and oh my gosh, from like what he did in 2006 and 2007 to like 2008 and 2009. His business basically, it went like less than half. It was a brutal time for everybody.
Well, keep in mind that we opened that shop in 2007.
Oh my gosh.
Everything just fell apart, really less than a year after we opened that new plant.
Oh my gosh. And that building was amazing.
Yes.
Big, huge. I think it's still there, right? Well, you haven't been down here far. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many times it's changed ownership now, but yeah. It was a 4-building complex, but the main building and the one across the street from it was a laminating building, but the main building was, showroom and offices and assembly and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So looking back on all this, obviously I don't know, you're very humble, and we first started texting back and forth, and you were like, I don't know if anybody cares what I have to say. But when looking back, it was a great career. You got to do some really cool stuff, and you're involved in some, at least from a California standpoint, some really amazing projects and some amazing boats. And so, I don't know, I would imagine if you look back on it, it was a pretty good run.
It was a very good run. And I will say that, my family, my kids, my wife, and a lot of our grandchildren, had an opportunity to grow up, boating, mostly at Lake Mead. And, for that, they have memories, that last them a lifetime. And once all the kids were gone, wife and I made a couple of trips on a boat we shared, a Hallett 270, and it just wasn't the same without the kids. So we kind of just said, well, I guess we're done with this. Time to do other things.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll carve some time to get that 22 together. That'd be very cool.
Yeah, looking forward to it. My son was really anxious, but his life is hectic. Mm-hmm. I got a house to finish and get that organized. Maybe this time next year I can be working on it. Yeah,
that'd be cool. We'll look forward to seeing that. So, and then you, I guess it all kind of came to the end. I guess when Nick passed away, I guess that was pretty much the end of it. I think that was when, I think Shirley sold it, or Randy Davis and Nordic ended up buying it. Didn't you, before that happened, weren't you and Jerry talking about taking it over, or was there some consideration about that?
Yes, and that was a big consideration, and Nick had mentioned that's what he had hoped for, and yeah, he passed away in March of 2017. Prior to that, again, I think he knew the handwriting on the wall. He sold the facility on River Grade, and he knew he was dying. I mean, he had an incurable, blood disease, and he had battled it for a couple of years heroically, and just finally the medicines and his will to live gave up. But I think his big thing was he didn't want Shirley to be saddled with that monstrosity by the freeway, and he was able to get that sold and saw most of the remodeling of a small plant on Irwindale Avenue in Azusa. And, it was a rude awakening for us, having 30,000 square feet, all the room in the world, and, kind of the prestige of a garage.
Right.
And, I know Jerry worked hard to, maintain our image, and we did. And we actually had a halfway decent year in 2017. And things just weren't working out for Shirley. And I kind of decided that I just didn't want to, be a business owner at that time of life. So, Nick was always the driving force and the one that made it all happen. And I have to be honest with myself and other people that, he's the one that made it happen, and I just helped him. And I didn't see myself as the guy to make it happen as far as, from a business standpoint. Plus it takes money, you gotta have the capital, and neither Jerry or I had, the kind of money that, Nick and Shirley had accumulated and were able to draw from all their different holdings. So, Shirley just decided she saw the handwriting on the wall and, had an opportunity to, close the doors and still maintain some respect.
Yeah, it all makes sense. Nowadays, at the price of drives and stuff, like the cash flow you have to keep a business like that going. I mean, you can, you can tie up just in engines and drives for 2-3 boats. You tie up so much money that it's just, it would be a beast to feed. And you guys, you weren't starting from scratch, but you're still, would have been different. It would have been a lot of work. So. Yep, probably the best. Probably another good decision you made, Jim.
Well, it's bittersweet because seeing all that equipment and molds and whatnot get hauled off, to Havasu, everything basically stripped bare. But Randy Davis's people, where everybody was very respectful and nobody, kind of talk smack or anything like that. It was a business deal, and I think he got a pretty good deal and has been able to, I'm not sure exactly what's happening now, but I know from what I've watched over the last few years, I think he's really upheld his end of the bargain where he said he would continue to promote the Hallett brand. And I think at the Winter Nationals, I saw a post of a banner that had the Nordic and Hallett, logos. And when I saw that, it was almost like the Hallett logo overpowered the Nordic logo. And I was kind of surprised. I go, that's cool.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I think he does some marketing for drag racing, but, and I think you're right. I see just it seems like I don't pay that much attention, but it seems like I see just as much Hallett marketing and branding as I do Nordic, which is, it's a good, I mean, they both had great brands and, got 100 years of visibility. So that was smart, but I think you're right. He's got a really good crew up there, and I think it's really run professionally. And I think he's definitely done it justice. So it's good. Sounds like it worked out well for everybody. So, well, again, Jim, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And, maybe if you think of some more stuff, we'll get back together again and talk again. But, get that 22 going. And I'm sure people are going to be really, they're going to be texting me and emailing me trying to poke you to make sure you start working on it. So.
All right, we'll take up a GoFundMe page.
Hey, you know what? I think there's guys who've done it for worse things than that. So.
Well, thank you, Joe, very much. You brought back a lot of pleasant memories, and I'm always available. A lot of past customers have my phone number, and if I can help somebody, I'm more than happy to. Oh,
fantastic. That's a great offer. So, all right. Well, yeah, you take care of yourself and keep enjoying that retirement.
Thank you, Joe, very much.
All right, Jim. Take care.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com.